Hi and welcome to the open source video blog. This is the 5th edition, and although it's 2nd of September, we're going to be talking about the news from the open source software and hardware from the previous month, August 2020. In general, August is considered to be a vacation month and no major announcements are announced. However, in 2020, nothing is as we expected. So actually I have shortlisted some interesting news from both software and hardware related projects. Before we proceed, I'm happy to announce that for the very first time in the history of the open source video blog, we have a sponsor. This episode comes to you thanks to the support of PCBWay. PCBWay is a Chinese company specialized in printed circuit board manufacturing. You can upload your Gerber and Dreo files online and place an order. They will make it at a high quality, at a very affordable price. There are shipping options such as DHL for very fast delivery, no matter where you live. Furthermore, for new users of PCBWay, there is a welcome bonus, so you can get a free PCB. And now we're diving into the news, starting with Linux. We have to say happy birthday Linux. On 25th of August 1991, Linus Torvalds announced that he's working on a free operating system. As he said, just the hobby won't be a big and professional like GNU. Yeah, it didn't work out like that actually. As you know, at the moment, Linux is the most popular operating system, or if we're more exact, Linux distributions are among the most popular operating systems on various markets, including servers, mobile devices, wearables, pretty much anywhere apart from desktop and laptops for personal computers. Isn't that funny? Linux was designed by Linus Torvalds in order to have a Unix operating system on your personal computer, and almost 30 years later it's everywhere, but unfortunately still has a small market share for desktop computers. However, if you have a server, most probably it's running on Linux. If you have an embedded device with an operating system, most probably it's running with Linux. If you have an Android smartphone, it's running the Linux kernel. So the rest is history, and we have to say happy birthday Linux. 29 years of Linux. And thank you very much for keeping the chat going on. It's great to see that there are some people watching it, and I hope that all people here are open source enthusiasts like me. So once again, happy birthday Linux. It's a real milestone, because for the past 29 years the whole world has been different thanks to what Linus Torvalds created as a student at that time. And the news from August is that at the beginning of August, on 2nd of August actually, Linus Torvalds announced Linux kernel 5.8. According to his words, this is one of the biggest releases of all time. It provides basic support for the new IBM Power 10 processor. There are various improvements for ARM, including new system on chip and devices that have been added with ARM architecture. There are also improvements for the RISC-V architecture, a few changes related to MIPS. As you know, right now MIPS is not in very good condition. Less and less devices come on the market with MIPS systems on a chip, and new MIPS systems on a chip rarely appear on the market. However, it seems that this market gap is taken by RISC-V, because every day we read about new devices developed or already available on the market with RISC-V architecture. Furthermore, Linux kernel 5.8 adds boot region verification for exFAT file system. There are a lot of other minor file system improvements, or maybe not such minor, depends. You can have a look at the changelog to see all the new things coming with Linux kernel 5.8 related to virtualization, cryptography, security, and networking. And if you remember from the previous edition of the open source video blog, I've mentioned you about a conference that was about to take place in August. It already did. This was the Linux Plumbers Conference 2020. And there was a talk by two speakers who presented the state of Android on mainline kernels. As you know, Android that we all have on our smartphones, or at least I have it. To be honest, I wasn't super excited by Android when it appeared on the market. Back then I was a Nokia fanboy and I was using Nokia N9 with Linux. But however, you know, a decade later, the way to move forward is to just to have Android in my pocket. So I'm also an Android user. At least it's better than iOS in terms that it's still an open source project. So the Android open source project is the very basic project. The booting Android UI on it is now possible with just one patch with the Linux kernel 5.9, which is about to be released on the next cycle. This patch is for anonymous VMA naming. Until now, there have been a number of patches that has to be applied on top of the Linux kernel in order to get Android open source project working with it. Recently in Linux kernel 5.9 has been merged some inline crypto patches, and at the moment there is one single patch in order to boot Android open source project with Linux kernel. However, keep in mind that if you have a real device, most probably you need to apply a bunch of other patches coming from the board support package of a real device, such as the Snapdragon systems on a chip, which are quite popular in Android devices. More news about Linux, and more specifically Linux Foundation. Facebook is involved in numerous open source projects, most notably React and Open Compute Project, OSP. However, now Facebook is joining the Linux Foundation membership at the Platinum level. This is the highest level. As you know, Linux Foundation is established in order to keep the development of the Linux kernel. Actually, they're doing great job. Some of the most important contributors to the Linux ecosystem are working for the Linux Foundation, including Linus Torvalds himself. And now Facebook is a Platinum sponsor of the Linux Foundation. Other Platinum members are companies such as Google, AT&T, Intel, VMware, Samsung, NEC, Tencent, Oracle, Red Hat, and IBM, Hitachi, Fujitsu, Microsoft, and Huawei. So you can see that these are some of the biggest corporations in the IT industry, and they're all supporting the Linux Foundation. And this way, the projects by the Linux Foundation, of course, the most famous project of the Linux Foundation is the Linux kernel itself. More news, and more good news actually, about Linux. Lenovo now offers Fedora Linux preloaded systems. If you visit the Lenovo website and go to order a ThinkPad X1 Carbon Generation 8, you can select an operating system and choose Fedora for it. This is something great because this way you can pick up, first of all, you can pick up a laptop with Fedora Linux. For example, I'm using a ThinkPad. It's a T480S. However, it came with Microsoft Windows and I had to manually install Ubuntu. I'm an Ubuntu user. Now there is this new possibility to directly buy a ThinkPad X1 Carbon Generation X from the Lenovo website and select Fedora as pre-installed. The good news is that this will force companies like Lenovo to better test the Linux kernel and the selected GNU operating system, in this case Fedora, to make sure that it's fully hardware compatible with the hardware on which it's shipped as preloaded. Really great news. Now, the next news are actually, well, it's kind of mixed news, to be honest. The good news is that Mozilla released Firefox 80. The bad news is that Mozilla is in bad shape. They are doing major layoffs. About 250 employees will leave Mozilla. This is approximately 25% of all employees that they had. This is happening due to the failing revenue streaming from the COVID-19 pandemic. Unfortunately, Mozilla is in bad shape. They don't have enough funding, which means that they have to do major layoffs. Unfortunately, this would probably affect a lot of interesting open source projects on which Mozilla is working. As you know, Firefox is the most popular product by Mozilla. However, in the recent years, Mozilla has been investing in various new open source projects, such as speech recognition and text-to-speech projects, Internet of Things, virtual reality. All these open source projects require money and funding to be developed, to have all these people working on them, and unfortunately Mozilla is no longer able to keep the same number of employees. So we'll see how this will work out in longer term, but for the moment Mozilla is doing layoffs. I hope they will be in better shape soon. Moving on with WordPress. WordPress 5.5 was released. This happened on 11th of August. It brings a lot of new features, big fixes around accessibility, security, speed, and SEO, search engine optimization improvements. One of the important search engine optimization improvements is that now WordPress includes an XML sitemap generated directly from it. You no longer need a third-party plugin to generate an XML sitemap. It's great to see that this is in WordPress. As you know, WordPress is the most popular blogging platform out there. For the last 15 years, it became #1, and an enormous number of websites in the internet are running and powered by WordPress. So if you are a WordPress user, keep in mind that you can update to WordPress 5.5. More software news. LibreOffice. Do you use LibreOffice? I do, and actually the presentation that you are seeing right now has been created with LibreOffice Impress. LibreOffice is a free and open source office suite that runs on macOS, Microsoft Windows, and GNU Linux distribution. So frankly speaking, it's an alternative to the Microsoft Office suite, and I really enjoy using LibreOffice. It's great to see that there is a new major release with some major improvements. The most important one is the support for the open document format version 1.3. There is a refined ability to open, save, and read Microsoft Office documents in the Microsoft proprietary formats such as DocX, XLSX, and PPTX. This is pretty much the biggest challenge for any LibreOffice user, opening and saving documents that have been created by Microsoft Office users. So hopefully with the new version of LibreOffice, these things are getting better and better. Writer, which is the equivalent of Microsoft Word, now supports semi-transparent text, can display bookmarks inline in text, tweaks padding for numbered lists, and it's set to be to better handle quotation marks and apostrophes. Furthermore, there are new icons themes for macOS users of LibreOffice. There are also improved icons for Microsoft Windows. And both of those icon themes are available for Linux users, although as far as I know, they are not the default. And now a release about OctoPrint. Version 1.4.1 has been released. If you have a 3D printer, you're most probably already using OctoPrint. This is an open source web interface for managing and monitoring 3D printers. In general, it runs on a Raspberry Pi. This is the most standard setup, is to run it on a Raspberry Pi. I have a cheap, low-cost 3D printer. and I'm having a Raspberry Pi 3 connected to it with OctoPrint. So I'm a user of OctoPrint. If you have a look at my YouTube channel, you'll see some videos covering specific topics with OctoPrint. So version 1.4.1 was released in the beginning of August, more precisely on 4th of August, almost a month ago. So the new things are that the temperature tab got a new control to select pre-configured temperature profiles on all heaters with one click. The first run wizard now allows you to restore from a backup right away. This is pretty convenient because when you're running OctoPrint on a Raspberry Pi, you know that over the time the micro SD card may fail, and if you have a backup, this new feature provides you the opportunity to very quickly restore and repair this hardware problem with micro SD cards on Raspberry Pi that may occur. Furthermore, there are improvements for the plugin manager, and of course a lot of bug fixes and other small improvements. You have to look at the changelog to see all the details. Now we're moving to the second part of the open source video blog. We will be talking about news from the open source hardware world. Now, just to remind you that this episode of the open source video blog for August 2020 is sponsored by PCBWay. PCBWay is a Chinese company specialized in PCB prototyping and manufacturing. They have an excellent workflow where you can upload your Gerber and Drill files to their website, pay online, and get the print circuit boards delivered to your door with various shipping options, including a fast shipping with DHL. All the open source hardware news in the next few slides are related to projects certified by the Open Source Hardware Association, which means that their schematics and their files from which you can create Gerber and Drill files are available. And this is a great opportunity for you if you are just starting with hardware. You can export the Gerber and Drill files, upload them to PCBWay, and get your first PCBs ready. Furthermore, for new users, PCBWay has a promotion which pretty much gives you free PCBs. Give it a try. A link will be available at the description of the video. Once the live stream is ready, it will be recorded and uploaded. We're starting with HackRF One. This is a gadget from Great Scott Gadgets. It's a software-defined radio peripheral capable of transmission or reception of radio signals from 1 MHz to 6 GHz. It can be used as a USB peripheral or programmed for standalone operation. The HackRF One has been certified by the Open Source Hardware Association at the beginning of August this year. This is the UID that it got. As you know, if you have already seen the previous episodes of the open source video blog, the Open Source Hardware Association is a legal entity, non-profit legal entity registered in the United States. They're running this program for certifying hardware because it's a major problem that in the maker community, there are a lot of individuals and companies claiming to be open source, but not actually releasing the source or not releasing it under an appropriate license which allow you to use it, modify it, or even sell it. So the Open Source Hardware Association provides this free certification service where you can upload your project, they will review it, and if it comply with all rules to be called open source hardware, they give you this unique UID. The beginning of the UID is the code for the country, followed by a unique number for the certified project. Keep in mind that this number changes if you upload a new version of already certified project. So if a HackRF One at one moment has a new hardware revision, it should go through the open source hardware certification program once again and will get a new UID. Another project certified by the Open Source Hardware Association in the beginning of August is called Rudy. It's a breadboard friendly Arduino compatible Atmega 32 8 development board. This is pretty much the same microcontroller nowadays manufactured by Microchip, because you know that a couple of years ago Microchip acquired Atmel. This is the same microcontroller that you can find in some Arduino boards, such as Arduino Uno. So Rudy is a breadboard friendly Arduino compatible development board with Atmega 328 with optional USB functionality via the popular VUSB library. You can see it here. It's with through-hole components. It's super easy to place it on a breadboard, and the UID here starts with FI, because this is a project from Finland. Yeah, it's great to see so many different projects from around the world being certified by the Open Source Hardware Association. Now, let's move on to the next project, which is a development board based on the SAM R21G18. Wow, that's a difficult name. A module. It's made by the hackerspace of San Salvador, and actually this is the very first open source hardware from El Salvador. It has been certified by the Open Source Hardware Association on 20th of August. It got its unique UID, and since it's the first from El Salvador, you can see that the number is number 1. And now, by the way, if you are interested in open source hardware, and if you live in a country which still has not certified any open source hardware projects, you have the unique opportunity to be the first one from your country by certifying something that's open source. However, keep in mind that the whole open source movement is getting some traction. More and more people are developing and sharing open source hardware designs. So there have been a lot of certified open source hardware products by the Open Source Hardware Association. And as I said, this is the first one from El Salvador. Pretty cool, isn't it? And now this is a project that I really enjoy. This is a keyboard FeatherWing. It adds a handheld QWERTY keyboard and a 2.6 inches cover display. It's made by Arturo, who is obviously from Sweden, because this is the certification number that he got from the Open Source Hardware Association. And have a look at this. Have a look at this keyboard. Do you remember it? This is a keyboard from BlackBerry Q10. You can see the QWERTY keyboard here. If you miss the days like 15 years ago, where BlackBerry was one of the most popular smartphones out there on the market, you can still find these keyboards, and you can buy this whole kit for keyboard FeatherWing with the display and the keyboard from Arturo. He's selling it for $55 US at Tindy. This does not include the shipping, and the shipping depends on the address to which it should be shipped. To be honest with you, I really miss the days where when the smartphones had hardware keyboard. Nowadays I have to type using my thumbs, and you know, like writing with just 2 fingers is not the same as writing with 10 fingers on the keyboard. So most of the operations that I do on my smartphone take quite some time. So most of the time I just prefer to sit on the keyboard on my computer and write. Maybe a little bit more than 10 years ago, maybe 11 years ago, I had a Nokia E7, which was with Symbian and the hardware keyboard. After that, I had Nokia N950, which was a developer edition. Recently, I purchased a second-hand Nokia N900, and I really miss all those models had these hardware keyboards, and this is something that I miss on my modern smartphones. I miss the opportunity to type on a hardware keyboard. Let me know in the comments if you feel the same. I guess some of the younger people probably are just used with the virtual keyboards, and they don't have this nostalgia like me about hardware keyboards. But for me, yeah, I definitely miss it. And the next project is actually my project. It's a programmable 8-key mechanical keypad with backlighting, underlighting, and OLED screen. It has been already certified by the Open Source Hardware Association in July. And at the end of August, Crowd Supply launched a crowdfunding campaign. Here it is. You can see it. It actually works right now. I'm controlling OBS with it. Let me give it a try. See if it works. Yeah. So here it is. It has a mini OLED display. On the back, there are some cover lightnings with addressable LED strips. There are also these nice looking stickers that you can attach. The keycaps are translucent. The switches are Gateron switches, and you can customize it because each kit will include this emoji stickers, and you can put them on the buttons to make sure that it's easier for you to use the keyboard. So this is a short advertisement of a project that I'm doing. Actually, the campaign is going really well. A lot of people have already ordered it at Crowd Supply. I didn't expect so many people to be interested in this project. The print circuit boards, which are golden, will be manufactured in a small local company in my hometown, Plovdiv, Bulgaria. I'm trying to support the local economy. I'm doing this as a side project just for fun, and it's a great way to do a low volume manufacturing here in my hometown, Plovdiv, Bulgaria. And now we're moving on to a couple of super interesting open source hardware projects which are for retro computing. The first one of them is ZT080. And this is a project featuring the Z80 8 microprocessor by Zilog. It's from, this thing is 44 years old. This microprocessor has been released in 1976, and it was widely used in personal computer in the 80s, such as Sinclair ZX Spectrum. Those who grow up in the 80s or the 90s. I grew up in the 90s, but I still kind of remember these computers. All these computers were powered with Z80 or similar single board, or similar microprocessors. So Jacob Hahn from the United States, he made the Z80 single board computer. It's a single board computer like a Raspberry Pi, but using a microcontroller that's microprocessor that's 44 years old. Here are a couple of photos that I took from the project page at Hackaday.io. It has been certified by the Open Source Hardware Association at the end of August this year. This is the UID US653. I really like this sign. You can see it here. It says Z80 inside. Really cool project. I'll keep an eye on it. The next cool project is about, again, retro computers, but this time about Atari 8-bit microcomputers. It's called FujiNet. This project is made by Joseph Honnold. Sorry if I'm pronouncing the name incorrectly. The project has been certified by the Open Source Hardware Association in mid-August. It's another project from the United States. Here are a couple of photos. This is the FujiNet connected to Atari 800, a very popular computer from the late 70s actually, or the beginning of 80s. Recently I bought a similar computer. I bought an Atari 600. So I'll be playing with it and hopefully review it in the coming month. I still don't have enough time to play with it. These are the schematics. The whole idea is that the FujiNet emulates a floppy disk drive, printers, modems, and most importantly, and probably this is the most interesting thing because it's an innovation, FujiNet provides a new network interface so that you can connect these almost 40 years old computers to the internet and to modern networks. And thank you very much for your comments. I see some comments, and Alfred says that he missed telephones with rotary dial. Oh, that's cool. And by the way, Alfred, there are some interesting projects that I have seen, but I haven't done personally, probably due to a lack of time. I have seen people taking the rotary dial and installing it to Arduino or Raspberry Pi and making some home automations. Such prototypes can be seen in Hackstore or Hackaday. It's something really cool, and if you miss that much the rotary dials, you can make some really cool modern days Internet of Things with rotary dials. It's a great result. And we're coming to the end of this episode of the open source video blog, but before that I would like to share with you some interesting events that are coming. The calendar for September, October and November is actually fully loaded. This is just a short list of events. The first event starts in 2 days. It's Academy 2020. All the events here that you see, unfortunately, due to the circumstances in 2020, are virtual. Academy is it's with K because it's a KDE event. Last year, if I remember correctly, it was in Italy. This time it's virtual. There will be a lot of presentations. It's a free event, so I think it's not too late to register, and you can join this event. The next interesting event is Linaro Connect. It's at the end of September, 22nd, 23rd of September. Again, a virtual event. As far as I remember, it's again a free event. After that, in October, there is going to be a major event by the Linux Foundation. There are actually 2 events, or actually several events, 2 major events and a few other collocated events. The Open Source Software Summit and Embedded Linux Conference Europe. As you know, earlier this year, earlier this year, the Embedded Linux Conference in the United States was moved to a virtual event, and now they had to do the same for the Open Source Summit and Embedded Linux Conference, actually for pretty much all the events that Linux Foundation is organizing. The Open Source Summit and the Embedded Linux Conference Europe, they're paid events, but the tax is reduced. It's significantly smaller than the regular price. I think it's about $50 US. The keynotes have been announced. The schedule should be announced really soon, I believe in the coming days. Francois here is writing that he has a seat probably for Academy. And for those of you who are not familiar with Francois, he's famous, and most probably you are using his code because he's the leading developer of VLC, the video LAN. Unfortunately, we haven't seen each other for quite some time because most of the events have been canceled or moved to virtual events, and I'm in Bulgaria. I haven't left my city for 6 months. So, and Francois says that unfortunately there will be no physical FOSDEM in February 2021. That's really sad news. FOSDEM is my favorite open source event. I really miss it. Anyway, let's try to stay positive, because on the other hand, having all these events as virtual provides the opportunity more people to join them, and to save some time, because traveling around the world sometimes takes a lot of time, and sometimes it's expensive, especially for students. And now when we have all these events as virtual, students can join. At the beginning of November, on 7th and 8th of November, OpenFest 2020 will happen. OpenFest is the biggest open source conference in the country where I live in Bulgaria. I really enjoy visiting OpenFest. Unfortunately, this year it's gonna be virtual, but this means that you can also visit it. In general, OpenFest has talks in both Bulgarian and English, and actually Francois has been a speaker at OpenFest last year or the previous year. So yeah, there are a lot of interesting talks, and if you search in YouTube, you'll find a lot of records from previous editions of OpenFest. OpenFest is looking for speakers, so you can apply and be a speaker at this event in Bulgaria. which is going to be virtual. So you'll be staying at your home, but you'll be participating in event in Bulgaria. That's going to be interesting. This is the first time when the OpenFest is happening virtually. So it's going to be a challenge. We'll see how it works. I'm part of the volunteers helping with the organization of OpenFest. I think it's going to be pretty cool, even if when it's a virtual event. And the final event that I have shortlisted here is the Linux App Summit, which is happening in mid-November, and it's another virtual event. Furthermore, events, not conferences, but more like events throughout the whole throughout the whole month. Hacktoberfest 2020, it's organized again by GitHub, DigitalOcean, as well as a bunch of other sponsors such as Intel, Dev, and so on. The idea of Hacktoberfest is that it's a whole month to celebrate open source and it encourages people to make contributions in their spare time to open source projects, which are hosted in GitHub, pretty much to open GitHub pull requests. And if you achieve the goal there, each year Hacktoberfest have some specific goals, such as like open a specific number of GitHub pull requests. I'm not sure what is going to be the number for this year. So if you make these contributions and if they're valuable contribution, you get a really cool slug as a reward. I've participated twice in Hacktoberfest. Actually, a friend from here, from the local community in my hometown in Plovdiv, Bulgaria, did a couple of workshops to celebrate Hacktoberfest last year and the previous year. His name is Jordan Ivanov. So I got inspired because of these workshops, and I also participated in the Hacktoberfest edition for 2018 and 2019. I have some super cool t-shirts that were delivered shortly after October. I think I had it by the end of November. So I really encourage you to join Hacktoberfest. Most probably you have already done, but if you haven't, now it's a great opportunity for you to get involved with more open source projects hosted in GitHub and make some contributions, meet new people, and eventually get some presents from DigitalOcean and GitHub. Another important event in October, and that's going throughout the whole month, is the Open Source Hardware Month. It's organized by the Open Source Hardware Association. So the idea is to have various events around the world to promote the open source hardware movement. As you know, the open source hardware movement is getting some traction. It's getting better and better. There are projects, open source hardware projects from all around the world. However, it still does not have the scale that the free and open source software has. And the Open Source Hardware Association is helping people by providing resources, and they ask the community to host events in the name of open source hardware. This year is going to be tricky because pretty much all around the world the events should be virtual, so we'll see how it goes, but keep an eye on it. And if you're interested in spreading the word about open source hardware, visit this microsite to learn more details. And there's still time to prepare because the Open Source Hardware Month, just like Hacktoberfest, will be both in October. And actually you can combine them, because if you have a hardware project hosted in GitHub, you can make an event to celebrate the Open Source Hardware Month and explain people how to make GitHub pull requests to modify an open source project. And the best way is to do what I do actually, is to design open source hardware with free and open source software such as KiCad. Some people call it KiCad, others call it KiCad. I'm very bad at pronunciation, not sure which is the correct version. I like the more American sounding KiCad. All right. Thank you very much for your attention. It's been fantastic. I'm doing this, the open source video blog, as a hobby. The open source ecosystem is really huge. There are so many things going on, and as you can see, I have just shortlisted a few projects that are interesting to me that I wanted to announce here. Huge thanks to PCBWay. Thanks to PCBWay, this episode is coming to you. Once again, PCBWay is a company specialized in PCB manufacturing and prototyping. So if you are interested in getting started with open source hardware, you can use their services. New users get a bonus, so you can get some free printed circuit boards. PCBWay in general offers high quality at affordable prices, so it's a great way to make hardware, especially if you don't have a local manufacturing company near you, because PCBWay offers excellent shipping services, and you can get the boards very quickly. The whole process for ordering print circuit boards at PCBWay is automated, so you upload your Gerber and Drew files. Gerber and Drew files, for those of you who are not familiar with hardware, are kind of, how to explain it simple, kind of a PDF. So pretty much you design your board no matter what kind of software you are using, no matter if it's KiCad, Altium, or whatever. You design it with this preferred software that you have to design the board. After that, you export the Gerber and the Drew files, and you provide these Gerber and Drew files to the factory, for example, to the sponsor of this episode, PCBWay. And PCBWay, on the website of PCBWay, you can select certain things. For example, the color of the PCB. It can be green, it can be red, blue, all major colors are present. Then PCBWay very quickly will manufacture these boards. Pretty much, I think they do it in 24 hours and ship it to you. So in just a few working days, you can get the print circuit board that you have designed to get it on your desk and to try out your prototype. Thank you very much all for joining. Alfred, thank you for joining. Francois, thank you for joining. Stoyan, Vasilina, it's great to see all of you here. Keep in mind that I'm doing this just for fun. I'm not very good at talking in front of the computer. I'm doing this live stream for 3 times. The first 2 episodes of the open source video blog were pre-recorded. Now I'm doing live streams. And I'm still not feeling very comfortable. Sorry if there were any technical issues during this episode. I'm really happy to see all of you here. And stay tuned for the next episode. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. We'll have at the end of September or the beginning of October, we will have the next episode of the open source video blog, where we're gonna cover news about things that happened in September. And in the meantime, please leave a comment if you have any news that I missed and you think that they're important and interesting. Thank you once again. It was a pleasure to be here with you.